The winter wind howled through Blackthorn Ridge, carving paths through snow that had fallen for 3 days. The abandoned rail station stood buried beneath drifts that reached the eaves. In the heart of this frozen wasteland, a woman knelt with her children pressed against her sides, their small bodies shaking with cold that had settled into their bones. Elena Ashford had stopped believing in miracles 6 months ago. James died in Denver, and she'd been running ever since, keeping her children alive through sheer will. Now, in January of 1887, even that will was crumbling. Her son Samuel, 8 years old, but carrying haunted eyes, dug through a broken crate near the platform's edge. His fingers, blue with cold, searched for anything edible. His sister Lily, barely 5, had stopped crying hours ago. That silence terrified Elena more than any scream. "Mama," Samuel whispered, his voice carried away by wind. "There's nothing left." Elena pulled them closer, feeling their hearts beat like trapped birds. She had made a decision in the dark hours before dawn. A decision that tore at her soul but seemed like the only path forward. She would give them away. To anyone kind enough to take them. At least they would survive. Wagon after wagon had passed through Blackthorn that morning, drivers hunched against the storm, eyes fixed forward. No one stopped. Elena had learned the world had no room for desperate women with starving children. Then, through sheets of white, a single rider appeared. He came from the north, moving against wind with steady determination. His horse, a powerful Appaloosa, picked its way carefully through drifts. The man sat tall despite the storm, broad shoulders wrapped in heavy leather. A Winchester rifle hung from his saddle. He should have ridden past like all the others, but 20 feet from the platform he stopped. The man turned his head slowly, and Elena felt his gaze fall upon them like physical weight. For a long moment, he simply stared. Then something shifted in his posture, tension running through his body as if struck. His jaw clenched. In his gray eyes, Elena saw something she recognized. The look of someone remembering loss too deep for words. He dismounted with careful precision, boots crunching in snow. Tall, perhaps 37, with a weathered face that came from decades of hard choices. But his hands stayed far from weapons as he approached. "Ma'am," he said, voice steady despite howling storm. "You shouldn't be out here." Elena looked up, desperation raw in her voice. "We have nowhere else." Samuel pressed closer to his mother. Lily hid her face completely. The man's eyes moved from Elena to the children, taking in hollow cheeks, trembling limbs, Samuel's hands wrapped in strips of cloth. "My babies haven't eaten in 2 days," Elena said, her voice breaking. She lifted Samuel's hand, showing blue fingers. Please take them." The man froze as if struck across the face. His eyes widened slightly. "Take your children," he repeated softly. Elena nodded, tears freezing on her cheeks. "People here take children as workers, or worse. But you look kind. You might give them a chance." She pushed Samuel forward gently. The boy tried to stand, but his legs wobbled. He barely made it 2 steps before strength gave out. The man caught him with reflexes that spoke of training, lowering Samuel carefully. Lily watched from behind her mother, too weak to cry. "Sir," Elena whispered, "I'm begging you, take them. At least they'll survive." The stranger knelt beside Samuel, checking pulse at wrist, then neck. Professional movements. After a long moment, he stood slowly, eyes burning with emotion Elena couldn't name. "Lady," he said, stepping closer, "I'm not taking your children." Elena began to cry, great heaving sobs. She thought he was refusing, but then his hand came forward, steady and strong. "I'm taking all 3 of you," he said, voice dropping into something like a vow carved from iron. "Pack your things. You're all coming home with me. Nobody gets left behind." Wind slammed into them, sending snow swirling, but the man didn't flinch. He stood there, hand extended, waiting. "Why?" Elena whispered. "We're strangers." He looked at her, something haunted flickering in his gaze. "Because once someone left my family in the cold," he said quietly. "I swore if I ever found others in that place, I'd drag them out myself." He turned and walked to his horse. He pulled a heavy wool coat from his saddlebag and wrapped it around Lily's tiny shoulders. The girl disappeared into its warmth. "Name's Caleb Stone," he said, lifting Lily into his saddle. "I've got a ranch past the ridge. Food, fire, beds." Elena found her voice shaky. "I can't pay." Caleb adjusted Lily's position. "Not asking for payment, just giving you what someone never gave me. A chance." Elena's knees nearly buckled. For 6 months every door had been closed, every hand pulled back. Now this stranger was offering everything she had stopped believing existed. Caleb lifted Samuel next, cradling the boy against his chest with unexpected gentleness. Samuel's head rested against his shoulder, eyes fluttering with exhaustion. Whatever Caleb murmured made the boy's breathing steady. Then Caleb extended his hand to Elena. This time she took it. His grip was firm, calloused, warm despite cold. He pulled her to her feet with ease that reminded her how weak she'd become. They stood face to face, close enough to see silver threading through his dark hairlines, bracketing his mouth, a scar through his left eyebrow. "You fall," Caleb said, eyes locked on hers. "I pick you up. That's how this works." Elena stared, trying to understand what kind of man would make such a promise. "Why treat us like family?" Caleb looked away out toward storm and mountains. "Because you are now." He led them through buried trail, holding a lantern against thickening storm. The path wound through towering pines, past frozen streams, over ridges where wind screamed through rock gaps. The world warped into white shadows and steady crunch of footsteps. The children clung to Caleb as if sensing safety they'd never known. Elena stumbled, legs numb from exhaustion. But every time she faltered, Caleb was there, hand on elbow, voice in ear, refusing to let her fall. They had walked perhaps an hour when the wolf howl echoed through trees joined by others until a chorus sang in darkness. Caleb stopped, hand moving to Winchester. He positioned himself between Elena and sound. "Stay behind me." Through snow shadows circled. Then eyes appeared between branches, yellow, calculating. Caleb raised rifle with practiced ease, finger on trigger. The wolf stared back. Then Caleb did something unexpected. He lowered the gun slightly and made a low, guttural sound. Warning. Claiming territory. The wolf's ears flicked forward. It studied Caleb with almost human intelligence. Then it melted back into darkness. Other shadows followed, howls growing distant. "They stalk the hungry," Caleb muttered. "But not tonight." Samuel looked up with wide eyes. "You didn't shoot it?" "No." "Why not?" Caleb glanced at the boy, approval flickering. "Because he was just surviving. Same as us. I don't kill what I don't have to." The trail narrowed along a cliffside where wind screamed through gaps. Elena pressed against mountain, one arm around each child. Below, darkness dropped into nothing. One wrong step meant death. Caleb pulled rope from his pack, thick hemp, weathered but reliable. He tied one end around his saddle horn with efficient knots, extended the other to Elena. "Tie this around your waist." Elena's hands shook as she worked the rope. "You trust me?" Caleb's smile was faint but genuine. "I trust that if you slip, I'm pulling you back." They crossed with agonizing slowness. Wind tore at them. Halfway across, Lily's foot slid on hidden ice. She cried out a small, terrified sound and began to fall. Caleb moved faster than seemed possible. He caught Lily in both arms, pulling her against his chest and pivoting from the edge. For a heartbeat, they teetered. Then Caleb's weight shifted, and they were safe, pressed against solid rock. He held Lily there, murmuring softly. Whatever he said worked. The girl's breathing steadied, her fingers unclenched from his coat. When Caleb set her down, Lily looked up at him with something close to worship. Elena watched with tightness in her chest. She had begged strangers before. Hundreds, perhaps. None had even slowed. Yet this man risked his life for her children as if they were his own. Something long dead flickered back to life. Hope. When they crested the ridge, Caleb pointed ahead. Through blizzard, faint lights glowed. Warm, steady, like fallen stars. "That's my ranch," he said. "Stone Ranch. You'll be safe there." Elena's throat tightened. "You barely know me." Caleb adjusted Samuel in his arms. "Ma'am, you asked me to save your kids. I'm doing one better." He looked at her, really looked. "I'm saving their mother, too." Her breath caught. No one had spoken to her like that, as if she mattered, as if her life had value. The ranch was larger than expected. 3 barns stood dark against snow. A long cabin dominated the center, smoke rising from its chimney. As they approached, an old shepherd dog bounded through snow, barking happily. It circled the children protectively. Caleb scratched the dog's ears. "See, even Scout knows you belong here." Elena stepped through the cabin door and gasped. Fire roared in a massive fieldstone fireplace. Thick wool blankets hung on pegs. Fresh bread sat on the table. The air smelled of pine and smoke and safety. Caleb placed Samuel near the hearth, checking pulse, breathing temperature. After a moment he nodded. "He'll recover," Caleb said gently. "Just needs heat and food." Lily sat wrapped in a quilt, eyes wide as she studied everything, the shelves of books, the rifle rack, the glowing embers. Elena approached Caleb, hands shaking with gratitude. "Why do all this?" He looked up, sincerity carved deep. "Because nobody should have to beg for life." As storm raged outside, Caleb ladled hot soup into bowls, beef and vegetables thick and nourishing. He set them before the children without hovering, without demanding thanks, just providing. Samuel and Lily fell on the food like starving animals. Elena tried to eat slowly, preserve dignity, but her body betrayed her. She was so hungry. Caleb watched with satisfaction. When Samuel licked his bowl clean, the man actually smiled. "Eat like my brother used to," he murmured. Elena set down her spoon carefully. "You had family." Caleb's jaw tightened. For a long moment, silence. Then he spoke, voice barely above fire's crackle. "Once." He stared at flames. "Blizzard took them when I was 19. My father, mother, brother Thomas. He was 10. Just a kid." "I'm sorry," Elena whispered. Caleb shook his head slowly. "I survived because a stranger dragged me out of snow half dead. Kept me alive when I wanted to die." He paused. "I swore that day if I ever found someone else in that cold, in that place where death seemed easier, I'd be that stranger. I'd drag them out myself." Elena felt tears burn. Not sadness, but understanding. Recognition that pain could transform into purpose. Later, after children slept by fire, Caleb showed Elena to a small room. A bed with clean sheets, a wash basin, clothes hanging on pegs. "These belonged to a neighbor's family," Caleb explained. "Moved east 2 years ago. Children can have the small ones." Elena touched the fabric with trembling fingers. Real wool, thick cotton. "You prepared all this?" Caleb shrugged, suddenly awkward. Had a feeling winter wasn't done breaking people. "You saved us," Elena said, voice cracking. He met her eyes and she saw past weathered exterior to the man beneath. Someone who had suffered, survived, chosen to turn pain into protection. "No," Caleb said quietly. "Now I found you. Saving starts now." As night fell, another storm rolled in, fiercer than the last. Caleb checked every shutter, every door reinforcing with wooden bars. Wind clawed at cabin walls like a living thing, but the structure held. "Storm's angry tonight," Caleb muttered. "Good thing you're not out there anymore." Elena stood in the main room, hugging herself. The fire blazed, children slept safe, yet she couldn't stop imagining what would have happened if Caleb had ridden past. Her knees weakened. Caleb was beside her instantly, hand on shoulder, warm, grounding. "Hey, you're safe now." When lightning flashed, Lily woke with a cry. Before Elena could reach her, Caleb lifted the girl gently. "Hey there, little one. Storms can't get you in here. I promise." Lily buried her face in his coat. Caleb held her until fear passed, rocking slightly, murmuring, until her breathing steadied. He carried her back to blankets and tucked her in with care that made Elena's chest ache. Samuel stirred and tugged Caleb's sleeve, voice heavy with sleep. "Are we staying forever?" Caleb hesitated, glanced at Elena. She found herself nodding. Permission, acceptance, hope. Caleb looked back at Samuel with careful honesty. "If your mama wants this home, it's yours as long as you breathe." Later, Elena stepped outside for air. She needed a moment to process everything, from depths of despair to this. It felt like a dream. Caleb followed, bringing a lantern. "Something bothering you?" Elena wrapped arms around herself, staring at falling snow. "Why do you look at us like we matter?" Caleb was quiet. When he spoke, words came slowly, pulled from somewhere deep. "Because you do matter. Because someone once looked at me like that, saved my life." He stepped closer. "And because I see strength in you, the kind most people overlook." Elena felt something shift inside. A wall cracking. "I don't feel strong." "You survived 6 months on the run with 2 children, Caleb said simply. "Kept them alive when most would have broken. That's not weakness. That's steel." The storm eased slightly by morning, leaving the world wrapped in glittering frost. Caleb saddled his horse as Elena and children ate breakfast. He moved with routine efficiency, but Elena noticed tension in shoulders. "I'm riding to town," he announced. "Need supplies. Some things we're running low on." Elena's breath hitched. "What if something happens?" Caleb looked at her, smile small but genuine. "Then I fight it. I always come back. I promise." It had been years since anyone promised Elena anything, but something in Caleb's eyes made her believe. "Stay inside," he added. "Wolves come down after storms. They're hungry and bold." Elena watched him ride away, disappearing into white landscape until just a dark shape, then gone. Hours passed. Sun climbed higher. Elena kept busy cleaning, tending fire, watching Samuel and Lily explore with growing confidence. But part of her attention never left the window. When Caleb appeared in late afternoon, his horse was lathered despite cold. He dismounted quickly, jaw-tight eyes scanning tree line before looking at cabin. Elena stepped outside. Something was wrong. "Trouble?" she asked. Caleb carried purchases inside, setting bags on table with force. "Some men in town noticed you were missing. The kind that don't ask politely." Fear stabbed through Elena. "They want my children." Caleb stepped closer, voice carrying absolute conviction. "Not anymore. They're under my protection now." He adjusted the Colt at his hip. "Anyone who wants them goes through me." That night Caleb stayed awake by fire. Winchester across knees, boots planted on floorboards, eyes on door. Elena approached quietly. "You haven't slept," she observed. Caleb shook his head. "People like them don't give up easy." Elena sat beside him, close enough to feel warmth radiating from his body. "You shouldn't risk your life for us." He turned to her, eyes burning in firelight. "Elena, your children ran to me like I was their father, and I felt something I thought I'd lost forever." Elena's heart pounded. She had known this man less than a day, but already he had become essential. Caleb continued, voice low and rough. "A man spends years alone, he forgets what warmth feels like, what it means to matter to someone." He ran a hand through hair. "I don't want to just protect you. I want you here, with me, for good." The words hung heavy between them. Elena took a trembling breath. "Caleb, you barely know me." "I know enough," he said firmly. "I know you walked through storms for your kids. I know you were ready to give them up so they could live. That takes courage most people don't have." He lifted her hand gently. "You told me you had nothing left. Let me prove you still do." His voice broke on the last word, and Elena saw past his strength to loneliness beneath, to the man who had lost everything and rebuilt himself into someone who protected others at cost of his own happiness. "Let me be something to you," Caleb whispered. Tears streamed down Elena's face as she nodded. "We'll stay. if you truly want us." "Elena," Caleb said, voice rough with emotion, "I want all three of you. Today, tomorrow, and every day after." The children woke then, drawn by instinct. They ran to Caleb and Elena, wrapping small arms around both adults' legs. Samuel looked up with sleepy eyes. "Are we a family now?" Caleb pulled them all close, arms strong enough to hold them together. "Yes," he said simply, "we're a family now." Outside, the storm finally quieted. Wind stopped howling. Snow fell gently, peacefully, as if the world itself was settling into this new arrangement. And inside the cabin on Stone Ranch, a family that had been broken in different ways found themselves whole again. For the first time in months, Elena felt something she thought lost forever. Not just safety or warmth, but belonging. The sense that she had found a place where she and her children could not just survive, but live, where they mattered, where they were chosen. Caleb Stone had made a promise in the snow, and he had kept it. He had saved them all, and in doing so, Elena realized they had saved him too. Dawn broke cold and clear. Caleb was already awake as he had been every morning for the past 15 years. Old habits from the war never truly left. The cabin was still dark except for dying embers in the fireplace. He moved quietly, adding wood to the fire before stepping outside into air so cold it burned his lungs. The world was silent in that way only winter mornings could be. Stars still hung overhead, brilliant against black sky. Caleb's breath came in steady clouds as he walked to the barn boots, crunching through fresh snow. He had chores that wouldn't wait. Animals needed feeding. Water needed hauling. Life on a ranch didn't pause for guests, no matter how desperately they needed rest. Inside the cabin, Elena stirred to the sound of an axe splitting wood. She sat up slowly, momentarily disoriented. The bed was soft. The room was warm. For a confused moment she thought she was dreaming. Then memory returned in a rush. Caleb Stone. The storm. The promise. She moved to the window and watched him work in the growing dawn light. Each swing of the axe was precise, efficient, no wasted motion. Steam rose from his shoulders despite the cold. There was something reassuring about watching him, this man who had pulled them from the edge of death and asked nothing in return. Samuel and Lily still slept by the fire, wrapped in blankets that probably cost more than Elena had earned in a month. Their faces were peaceful, fed, warm, safe. 3 things Elena had struggled to provide for half a year. When Caleb came back inside, stamping snow from his boots, he found Elena already dressed in the clothes he'd provided. She looked better after a night's sleep. Color had returned to her cheeks. Her hands didn't shake quite so badly. "Morning," Caleb said, setting an armload of wood by the fireplace. "Coffee's on if you want it." Elena nodded, not quite trusting her voice. She poured 2 cups from the pot he'd left warming on the stove, strong and black, military coffee. They sat at the table in comfortable silence, listening to the fire crackle. Outside, dawn painted the snow in shades of pink and gold. It was the kind of morning that made you believe the world could be beautiful if you just survived long enough to see it. "Thank you," Elena said finally, "for everything." Caleb shook his head. "No need for thanks. You're here now. That's what matters." The children woke shortly after, drawn by the smell of food. Caleb had prepared oatmeal with dried apples and cinnamon eggs from his chicken's bacon from his smokehouse. Real food. Substantial food. Samuel approached the table hesitantly. "Do we have to work to pay for this?" Caleb looked at the boy seriously. "No, but a man eats what he earns. Tomorrow I'll start teaching you ranch work. Not because you owe me, but because you need to know how to take care of yourself." Samuel nodded slowly, something like relief crossing his young face. Not charity, but opportunity. There was dignity in that. Lily ate more slowly, still wary. She kept glancing at Caleb as if expecting him to change, to become harsh like so many men they'd encountered. But Caleb's manner never shifted. Patient. Steady. When she couldn't finish her portion, he simply pushed his own plate toward her without comment. After breakfast, Elena insisted on washing dishes. Caleb didn't argue. He understood the need to contribute to not feel like a burden. Instead, he took the children outside to show them the ranch. "This is home now," he said, standing in the yard as morning sun climbed higher. 3 barns, main cabin, chicken coop, root cellar, 160 acres under the Homestead Act of 1862. Samuel's eyes went wide. "That's a lot of land." "It is," Caleb agreed. "Worked 5 years to prove it up. Built everything you see with these hands." He looked down at Samuel. "Land doesn't give you anything for free. You work it, respect it, it'll provide. You neglect it, it'll break you." He showed them how to feed the chickens, how to collect eggs without frightening the hens. Samuel proved quick to learn, his hands gentle despite his youth. Lily stayed close to Caleb, one small hand gripping his coat. In the barn, Caleb introduced them to his horses. Thunder the Appaloosa, who'd carried them through the storm. A bay mare named Copper. 2 draft horses for heavy work. "Horses are partners, not tools," Caleb explained. "You treat them right, they'll carry you through anything. Treat them poorly, they'll remember." Samuel reached out carefully to stroke Thunder's neck. The big horse lowered his head, accepting the boy's touch. Something passed between them, some understanding that made Caleb smile. "He likes you," Caleb observed. "How can you tell?" "Watch his ears. See how they're forward, relaxed. That's a horse paying attention, comfortable. Ears back, pinned flat, that's when you worry." They spent an hour in the barn, and Caleb found himself talking more than he had in months. Teaching felt good. Natural. Like a part of himself he'd forgotten existed. When they returned to the cabin, Elena had cleaned everything and started bread dough rising. She looked up as they entered, something uncertain in her expression. "I hope you don't mind," she said. "I found the flour and yeast." "Mind?" Caleb hung his coat on a peg. "Haven't had fresh bread in weeks. I'm grateful." Elena's shoulders relaxed slightly. She was still learning to trust this situation, to believe it wouldn't be snatched away. That afternoon, while the children napped, Caleb and Elena sat by the fire. The conversation that had been hovering between them since dawn finally began. "I need to know what we're running from," Caleb said quietly. "The men in town yesterday, they were looking for you specifically, asking questions, offering money." Elena's hands tightened in her lap. "His name is Thomas Merrick." The name hung in the air like smoke. Caleb waited, letting her find the words in her own time. "My husband James worked for him in Denver," Elena continued, voice steady despite the pain. "Merrick ran a freight company, legitimate on the surface. But James discovered something. Women and children being transported like cargo, sold." Caleb's expression hardened. "Human trafficking." "Yes." Elena met his eyes. "James found the records. Names, dates, destinations. Mostly to Mexico, some to California. 47 people over 2 years. He was going to bring it to the U.S. Marshal. But Merrick found out. July 15th last year. They said it was an accident. A wagon overturned. James died instantly." Elena's voice cracked. "But I saw the body. Saw what they did to him before they staged it." Caleb leaned forward, elbows on knees. "The ledger. You took it." "It was hidden in our home. James had shown me where, told me if anything happened to take it and run. So I did. Took the children and disappeared. 6 months ago. 6 months of running. Different towns, different names. The money ran out 2 weeks ago. We were starving when you found us." Caleb stood and walked to a wooden chest in the corner. He opened it and pulled out several documents. A land patent with an official seal, military discharge papers, a letter with faded ink. "This is my homestead claim," he said, laying them on the table. "Legally registered, all requirements met. This ranch is mine, free and clear. And these," he tapped the military papers, "prove I'm a Union Army veteran, served under Colonel Marcus Brennan." Elena looked at the documents, confused. "I don't understand." "Brennan is now a U.S. Marshal stationed at Fort Benton, 120 miles north." Caleb's eyes were steady. I saved his life at the Battle of Wilderness in '64. He owes me. More than that, he's a good man. Honest. If anyone can bring Merrick to justice, it's him." Hope flickered in Elena's chest, dangerous and painful. "You'd do that, ride to Fort Benton." "I'd ride to hell if it meant keeping you safe." Elena reached into her boot and pulled out a small leather pouch. Inside was a tightly folded packet wrapped in oilcloth. She unwrapped it carefully, revealing pages of meticulous handwriting. Dates, names, amounts paid, destinations. Caleb studied the ledger, his expression darkening with each page. "This is evidence enough to hang him." "If we can get it to the right person," Elena said. "But Merrick has money, influence. Sheriff Morrison in Silver Creek is on his payroll, the telegraph office too. We can't send word safely." "Then I ride to Fort Benton myself." Caleb looked up. 3 days there, 3 back if weather holds. You and the children stay here." Fear crossed Elena's face. "What if Merrick comes while you're gone?" Caleb stood and walked to the gun rack. He took down a Winchester rifle, checking the action. "I'm going to teach you how to use this, and I'm going to show you defensive positions in the cabin. You were a nurse in the war, you said?" "At Gettysburg, yes." "Then you've been under fire. You know how to keep your head in danger." He met her eyes. "I won't leave you defenseless." They spent the next hour on the shooting lesson. Caleb set up targets in a clearing behind the barn, out of sight from the main road. The Winchester had a kick, but Elena's hands were steady. Military training, even as a nurse, had included basic weapons handling. "Squeeze the trigger. Don't pull," Caleb instructed. "Let the shot surprise you." Elena fired. The tin can 20 yards away flew backward. Again. She worked the lever action, chambered another round, fired. Another hit. Caleb watched with approval. "You've done this before. Confederate cavalry broke into our field hospital during the battle," Elena said quietly. "They were drunk violent. The head nurse gave me a rifle. I used it." "How many shots?" "3. Elena lowered the rifle. 2 men. I didn't want to, but they were going to hurt the patients." Caleb nodded. "Killing is never easy, but protecting innocent people, that's different. You did what was necessary." They practiced until Elena could consistently hit targets at various distances. Caleb showed her how to reload quickly, how to clear a jam, how to maintain the weapon. Then he walked her through the cabin, pointing out strategic positions. "Windows here and here give you sight lines to all approaches. Keep shutters closed at night. If someone comes, you wake the children and get them into the root cellar. There's a hidden door under the rug by the far wall." Elena followed his instructions carefully, committing everything to memory. "How long will you be gone?" 6 days minimum. Could be 7 or 8 if I hit bad weather." Caleb pulled a box of ammunition from the shelf. "I'm leaving you 200 rounds. More than enough. And this." He handed her a Colt revolver, smaller than his own, but deadly at close range. "If they get inside," Caleb said seriously, "you don't hesitate. You protect those children." Elena took the revolver, feeling its weight. "I will." That evening Caleb prepared for the journey. He packed saddlebags with jerky hardtack and coffee, rolled blankets and a canvas tarp, cleaned his weapons and filled ammunition pouches. Elena watched him work with growing anxiety. "When do you leave?" she asked. "Dawn tomorrow. Sooner I go, sooner I'm back." Samuel appeared in the doorway. "You're leaving?" Caleb turned to the boy. "Just for a week. Going to get help. Someone who can stop the men chasing your mother." "What if something happens to you?" Caleb knelt to Samuel's level. "Then you become the man of this house. You protect your mother and sister. Can you do that?" Samuel's throat worked. "I'll try." "Trying is all any of us can do." Caleb gripped the boy's shoulder. "But I'm coming back. I promise. A man doesn't break his word." Lily ran to Caleb and wrapped her arms around his leg. "Don't go." Caleb lifted her gently. "I have to, little one. But I'll be back before you know it. And when I return, the bad men won't be able to hurt you anymore." "You promise?" I promise." That night sleep came hard for everyone. Caleb sat by the fire long after the others had gone to bed, cleaning his rifle one more time. Elena joined him after midnight. "Can't sleep?" Caleb asked. "Too much thinking." Elena sat beside him. "We've only known you 2 days. You're already risking everything for us." "Not everything. What I'm risking isn't as valuable as what I'm protecting." "Your life is valuable, Caleb." He looked at her, firelight dancing in his eyes. "My life has been empty for 15 years. Just work and silence and remembering what I lost. These past 2 days I've felt alive again. That's worth protecting." Elena's hand found his. "Come back safe." "I will." Dawn came cold and clear. Caleb saddled Thunder, checking every strap twice. He loaded his saddlebags and secured his rifle. Elena and the children stood on the porch, wrapped in blankets against the chill. Caleb mounted and looked down at them. 6 days, maybe 7. You see riders coming, you don't wait to see who they are. You get to the cellar." "We will," Elena promised. "Samuel, you're in charge of chores. Chickens need feeding twice a day. Horses need water. Wood needs bringing in." "Yes, sir." Caleb looked at Elena one more time. Something passed between them, unspoken but understood. Then he touched his hat brim and turned Thunder north. They watched until he disappeared over the ridge. Elena stood there long after, one arm around each child, wondering if she would ever see Caleb Stone again. In Silver Creek, 15 miles south, Thomas Merrick sat in the back room of the Silver Dollar Saloon. Sheriff Morrison stood before him, hat in hand. "Stone came to town yesterday," Morrison reported. "Bought supplies. Asked no questions but listened to everything." Merrick leaned back in his chair. Mid-40s, well-dressed, with the kind of face that looked trustworthy until you saw his eyes. "And he rode back toward his ranch. Word is he's got 3 people staying with him, woman and 2 children. Elena Ashford. That'd be my guess." Merrick drummed his fingers on the table. "Stone is a problem. War veteran. Homesteader with clear title. Can't just shoot him without consequences." "What do you want me to do?" "Nothing. Yet." Merrick smiled without warmth. "Let him think he's safe. Let him think his little ranch can protect them. Then we'll see how brave he is when real pressure comes." Morrison shifted uncomfortably. "Stone's not like other men. He's killed before. He won't scare easy." "Everyone scares when you threaten the right things," Merrick said softly. "Everyone has something they can't bear to lose." Back at Stone Ranch, Elena bolted the door and checked the windows. She placed the Winchester by the fireplace and the Colt under her pillow. Samuel and Lily helped with chores, their young faces serious with new responsibility. Night fell, and the cabin felt larger without Caleb. Emptier. Elena sat by the fire with the children reading from one of Caleb's books, but her mind kept drifting to the darkness outside, to the men who hunted them, to Caleb Stone riding alone through dangerous country. "Mama," Lily whispered, "is Uncle Caleb going to be okay?" Elena pulled her daughter close. "Yes, sweetheart. He's strong. He'll be fine." But as wind howled around the cabin and snow began to fall again, Elena wondered if she was trying to convince Lily or herself. Somewhere in the mountains north of Stone Ranch, Caleb made camp in a grove of pines. He built a small fire and boiled coffee. Thunder stood nearby, tied where he could reach grass under the snow. Caleb ate jerky and hardtack, his thoughts on the cabin he'd left behind, on Elena's courage, on children who'd already survived more than most adults, on the promise he'd made to return. He pulled out the ledger, studying it by firelight. 47 names, 47 lives destroyed by one man's greed. Thomas Merrick would answer for that. Not just for them, but for Elena, for Samuel and Lily, for the family Caleb had found when he stopped looking. He wrapped the ledger carefully and tucked it inside his coat closest to his heart. Then he lay back on his bedroll and watched stars appear through pine branches. 6 days. maybe 7. He'd make it 5 if he pushed hard. Behind him in the darkness something moved. Caleb's hand went to his rifle, but he didn't sit up. Not yet. He listened. Measured breathing. 4 legs, not 2. A deer probably, or possibly a wolf, checking if he was worth the trouble. After a moment the sound faded. Caleb relaxed slightly but didn't sleep. Not deeply. The wilderness taught you that real rest came in civilization. Out here you dozed with one eye open, or you didn't wake at all. Miles away at Stone Ranch, Elena did the same thing, dozing in a chair by the fire rifle across her lap, listening to every sound, protecting what had become precious in just 2 days. 2 people separated by distance, bound by something neither fully understood yet. A promise made in snow, a family built from strangers, a future hanging in balance. And somewhere between them, riding through darkness, Thomas Merrick's men were already moving. Day 1 of Caleb's journey north began with frozen ground and a sky that promised more snow. Thunder moved steadily beneath him, the Appaloosa's breath coming in white plumes. The trail to Fort Benton was well known to Caleb, though he hadn't ridden it in over a year. 120 miles through mountain passes and valleys where winter held dominion for 6 months of the year. He pushed hard that first day, covering 45 miles before the light began to fail. His body remembered the rhythm of long rides from his cavalry days. Sit deep in the saddle, move with the horse, conserve energy for when you need it most. At midday he stopped to rest Thunder and eat. The landscape stretched white and endless in all directions. Somewhere behind him Elena and the children waited. Somewhere ahead Marcus Brennan and the law that could end this nightmare. Caleb was the thread connecting them, and he felt the weight of that responsibility in his bones. He thought about Elena as he rode, the way she'd looked at him when he handed her the rifle. Not with the helplessness of someone who needed protection, but with the determination of someone who would protect what mattered. She'd been a nurse in the worst battle of the war. She'd watched men die by the hundreds. That kind of experience either broke you or forged you into steel. Elena was steel. As afternoon shadows lengthened, Caleb found himself scanning the tree line more frequently. This stretch of country was relatively safe, but relatively meant nothing in Montana winter. Blackfeet hunting parties still moved through these mountains. Outlaws knew the passes, and somewhere possibly Thomas Merrick's men might be following. He made camp that night beside Rocky Creek, where water ran fast enough not to freeze completely. Caleb built a fire just large enough for coffee and warmth, small enough not to be seen from distance. He tied Thunder within arm's reach and laid his Winchester across his bedroll. The stars came out brilliant and cold. Caleb drank his coffee and thought about Samuel's question. What if something happens to you? The boy had seen too much death already. Losing another father figure would damage him in ways that might never heal. Caleb had to make it back, not just for Elena and the children, but for himself. For the first time in 15 years, he had something worth returning to. He slept in 4-hour shifts, the way he'd learned in the war, deep enough to rest, light enough to wake at the first wrong sound. Nothing disturbed him except an owl hunting nearby and Thunder shifting position once. Dawn came gray and bitter. Caleb broke camp quickly, eating hardtack as he saddled Thunder. The second day would be harder. The trail climbed into the Little Belt Mountains where snow lay deeper and the cold cut like knives. By noon they were climbing steadily. The path narrowed to barely wider than a horse with drop-offs on one side that fell away into nothing. Thunder picked his way carefully, trusting Caleb to guide him true. Ice made every step treacherous. Halfway up the pass, Caleb encountered 2 trappers coming down, rough men with long beards and suspicious eyes. They stopped when they saw him. "Heading to Fort Benton?" the older one asked. "That's right." "Might want to reconsider. Blackfeet raiding party came through 3 days ago. Killed 2 prospectors up near Bear Creek." Caleb absorbed this information. How many? 6, maybe 8. Young warriors looking to prove themselves. Winter makes men desperate. Appreciate the warning. The trappers moved past, and Caleb continued upward. He wasn't particularly worried about Blackfeet. He'd traded with them years ago, even learned some of their language. Most tribes in this area knew him as someone who kept his word and respected their land. Still, desperate men did desperate things regardless of race or creed. Caleb kept his rifle loose in its scabbard. The incident came 2 hours later as Caleb crested a ridge overlooking a narrow valley. 3 Blackfeet warriors stepped onto the trail ahead, blocking his path. They carried rifles and wore winter gear decorated with traditional beadwork. Young men, as the trapper had said, early 20s with the hard eyes of those who'd seen violence. Caleb stopped thunder and raised his right-hand palm forward, the universal sign of peace. The center warrior, slightly taller than the others, spoke in Blackfeet. "Where do you ride, white man?" Caleb responded in the same language, his accent rough but understandable. "To the soldier fort. I carry words for the soldier chief." Surprise flickered across the warriors' faces. Few whites spoke their tongue. "You know our words," the tall one said. "I know some. A man named Running Elk taught me many winters ago." He said knowing another man's language shows respect. The warriors exchanged glances. One of them, younger with a scar on his cheek, spoke urgently to the leader in rapid Blackfeet. Caleb caught only pieces, but the tone was argumentative. The leader held up a hand, silencing his companion. He studied Caleb for a long moment. "I am Tall Pine," he said, switching to English. "Running Elk was my uncle. He spoke of a white man who pulled a Blackfeet child from a frozen stream, a man with spots on his horse." Caleb nodded slowly. 7 years ago. The boy was maybe 5 years old. He is my cousin. He lives because of you." Tall Pine gestured to the trail ahead. "You may pass. More, I will show you the quick path through the mountains. Save you half a day." The scarred warrior protested again in Blackfeet, but Tall Pine cut him off with a sharp word. Honor apparently outweighed whatever grievance they carried. Tall Pine led Caleb off the main trail onto a path that wound through heavy timber. The going was rougher but more direct. They rode in silence for an hour before Tall Pine spoke again. "The soldier chief you seek, what words do you carry?" Caleb considered how much to say. "There is a man who steals women and children, sells them like horses. I have proof. The soldier chief can stop him." Tall Pine's expression darkened. "This man has taken from my people too. 2 women from our winter camp 3 moons past. We tracked them but lost the trail near the big river. If the soldier chief stops him, your women may return. Or they may be dead already." Tall Pine's voice was flat. "But if you stop this man, the Blackfeet will remember. We have long memories, Stone." Caleb hadn't given his name, but clearly Tall Pine knew more about him than he'd let on. In these mountains, reputation traveled faster than horses. They reached a point where the timber opened onto a high meadow. Tall Pine pointed northwest. "That way. Follow the creek until it joins the big river. Fort Benton is 1 day more." "Thank you." Tall Pine nodded. "Running Elk said you were a man who keeps promises. Show me he was right." The warriors melted back into the trees, leaving Caleb alone. He continued on the path they'd shown him, making good time despite the altitude. By evening he'd covered another 40 miles. Better than he'd hoped. That night camped in a hollow protected from wind. Caleb cleaned his rifle and thought about the web of connections that made survival possible. A child pulled from a stream 7 years ago. An uncle who'd taught him words in another language. A young warrior who remembered debts. Everything connected. Everything mattered. He wondered if Elena understood that yet. She'd been running so long, trusting no one, that she'd forgotten how human bonds could be armor as strong as any weapon. Day 3 dawned clear and cold. Caleb could see his breath inside his bedroll. His muscles ached from 2 days of hard riding, but he ignored the discomfort. He'd ridden farther on less sleep with worse wounds during the war. This was nothing. The trail descended from the mountains into rolling hills. Patches of grassland showed through snow where wind had scoured the ground bare. In the distance, Caleb could see the Missouri River, a dark ribbon cutting through white landscape. By early afternoon, Fort Benton appeared on the horizon. The military post sat on high ground overlooking the river, its stockade walls visible from miles away. Smoke rose from chimneys. The American flag snapped in the wind. Caleb felt tension ease slightly from his shoulders. He'd made it. 3 days instead of 4. Now came the hard part, convincing Marcus Brennan to act. He rode through the fort's main gate just as the sun touched the western horizon. Soldiers moved between buildings, going about the routine of military life. Caleb remembered it well. The structure, the discipline, the knowledge that every day was planned from reveille to taps. He asked a corporal where to find Colonel Brennan. The young man directed him to the commandant's office, a solid building near the center of the compound. Caleb dismounted, tied Thunder to a hitching rail, and climbed the steps. Inside, a sergeant sat at a desk covered with papers. "Help you?" the sergeant asked without looking up. "I need to see Colonel Brennan. Tell him Caleb Stone is here." Now the sergeant looked up, taking in Caleb's weathered appearance, the trail dust, the hard eyes. "The colonel is a busy man. What's this regarding? Tell him it's about Wilderness. He'll understand." The sergeant's expression shifted slightly. He stood and disappeared through a door. Voices murmured inside. Then the door opened wider. Marcus Brennan stood there, older than Caleb remembered, but still carrying himself with military bearing. His hair had gone mostly gray and lines etched deep around his eyes, but those eyes were sharp as ever, missing nothing. "Stone," Brennan said. "I'll be damned. 23 years since Wilderness. 23 years since I pulled your sorry hide out of a burning thicket." Brennan's face split into a genuine smile. "Come in. Sergeant, bring coffee and close the door." The office was sparse but comfortable. Maps covered one wall. A desk held neat stacks of papers. Brennan gestured to a chair and sat behind his desk. "You look like you've ridden hard," Brennan observed. 3 days from my ranch. I need your help, Marcus, the way you once needed mine." Brennan leaned back. "I'm listening." Caleb pulled out the ledger and placed it on the desk. As Brennan examined it, Caleb told the story. James Ashford, Thomas Merrick, the freight company that was cover for trafficking, Elena running with her children, the promise Caleb had made in the snow. Brennan's expression grew darker with each page. When he finished reading, he looked up at Caleb with something cold in his eyes. 47 people. Jesus Christ. "Can you stop him?" "Stop him, I can hang him." Brennan stood and walked to the window. "But it won't be quick. I'll need to coordinate with Denver, get warrants issued. Merrick has money and connections. This has to be done by the book or he'll slip through." "How long?" 2 weeks minimum to get everything in place. I can send a squad to your ranch in the meantime. Protection detail." Caleb shook his head. "Too slow. Merrick knows Elena is at my place. He'll move before your paperwork clears." "Then what do you propose?" "Send a telegraph to Fort Shaw. It's closer, only 60 miles from my ranch. Have them send cavalry to Stone Ranch immediately. 6 men should be enough to hold off any attack until your warrants come through." Brennan considered this. "Fort Shaw's telegraph line is working. I can have orders there by tomorrow morning. Cavalry could reach your ranch in 2 days. Do it." "And you?" "I'm riding back now, tonight." "Stone, you just rode 120 miles. You need rest." "I need to get back to Elena and those children before Merrick makes his move." Caleb stood. "Send your cavalry. I'll hold the ranch until they arrive." Brennan studied him for a long moment. Then he nodded. "You love this woman?" It wasn't a question, but Caleb answered anyway. "I do." "Then ride hard, my friend. I'll have that telegraph sent within the hour." Brennan extended his hand. "And Stone, thank you. For Wilderness. For this. You're still saving lives." "Just trying to keep a promise." Caleb left the office and walked back to Thunder. The horse had been watered and fed by a stable hand. Good. They'd need every bit of strength for the return journey. As Caleb checked his saddle, a voice called out behind him, "Mr. Stone!" He turned. A young lieutenant stood there, barely 25, with the keen look of someone who took his duty seriously. "Lieutenant Carter," the officer introduced himself. "Colonel Brennan asked me to give you this." He handed Caleb a sealed envelope. "It's a letter of authority. If you encounter any military personnel or law enforcement, show them this. It states you're acting under federal orders." Caleb tucked the envelope inside his coat. "Thank you, Lieutenant." "Sir, the colonel also wanted me to tell you that I'll be leading the cavalry detail to your ranch, 6 men, myself included. We'll ride out from Fort Shaw as soon as we receive orders." "How long?" "Orders tomorrow morning, ride out by noon. We can make it in 48 hours if we push." Caleb calculated quickly. 3 days back to his ranch if he rode at normal pace, 2 days if he pushed Thunder hard and rode through nights. The cavalry would arrive roughly the same time he did. "Lieutenant, when you get to Stone Ranch, there's a woman there named Elena Ashford. 2 children, Samuel and Lily. They're under my protection. Your job is to make sure no harm comes to them." Carter nodded seriously. "Understood, sir. The colonel briefed me. Thomas Merrick and his associates are not to approach that ranch. And if they do, then they'll answer to the United States Army." Caleb mounted Thunder. The sun had set fully now, stars beginning to emerge. He'd ride through the night, rest briefly at dawn, then ride again. 3 days could become 2.5 if he didn't stop. As he turned Thunder toward the gate, Caleb thought about Elena sitting by the fire with a rifle across her lap, about Samuel trying to be brave, about Lily's small hand gripping his coat. They were counting on him to return, to keep his promise. He touched his heels to Thunder's flanks, and the Appaloosa moved into a steady trot. Behind them, Fort Benton disappeared into darkness. Ahead, 120 miles of winter wilderness, and beyond that, home. But Caleb didn't know that while he rode north, events at Stone Ranch had already taken a darker turn. On the evening of day 2, as Caleb met with Marcus Brennan, Thomas Merrick sat in a cabin 5 miles from Stone Ranch. 4 men sat with him, hard men, the kind who asked no questions and took money for work others wouldn't touch. "Stone's gone," one of them reported. "Rode out 2 days ago, hasn't come back." Merrick smiled. "Good. That makes things simpler. What do you want us to do?" "I want Elena Ashford alive. The children don't matter. Stone's ranch burns. Make it look like an accident. Overturned lantern. These things happen in winter." The men nodded. They'd done worse for less money. "When?" one asked. "Tonight. Hit them at midnight when they're asleep. Quick and clean." At Stone Ranch, Elena lay in Caleb's bed with the Colt under her pillow. She'd been sleeping in shifts like Caleb taught her. 4 hours asleep, 2 hours watching. It was exhausting, but she couldn't risk letting her guard down. Samuel and Lily slept in the main room close to the fire. Elena had moved their bedrolls there after the first night, wanting them where she could see them at all times. It was near midnight when Scout began to bark. Not the happy bark of greeting, but the deep warning bark that raised the hair on Elena's neck. She was out of bed instantly, Colt in hand. She moved to the window and peered through a gap in the shutters. At first she saw nothing but darkness and snow, then movement. 4 shapes moving toward the cabin, men on foot trying to be quiet. Elena's heart hammered. She ran to the children and shook them awake. "Samuel, Lily, wake up now, don't talk, just follow me." The terror in her voice cut through their sleep. They stumbled up, eyes wide. Elena led them to the far wall and rolled back the rug, revealing the trapdoor Caleb had shown her. She yanked it open. Stone steps led down into darkness. "Get down there," Elena whispered. "Hide behind the barrels like I showed you. Don't make a sound no matter what you hear. Understand?" Samuel nodded, already moving. He took Lily's hand and guided her down. Elena closed the trapdoor and rolled the rug back over it. Then she grabbed the Winchester, checked that it was loaded, and moved to the window. Her hands were steady. Her breathing was controlled. She'd been under fire before. She could do this again. Outside, the 4 men were closer now. One of them carried something that looked like a torch or lantern. They were planning to burn the cabin, burn her and the children alive. Not if Elena had anything to say about it. She positioned herself behind an overturned table near the window, using it as cover. She opened the shutter slightly, just enough to aim through. When the first man stepped into the yard, Elena fired. The Winchester's report shattered the night's silence. The man went down clutching his shoulder. The others scattered, diving for cover. "Woman's armed!" one of them shouted. "Merrick didn't say anything about this." Elena worked the lever action, chambering another round. She fired at a shadow moving near the barn. Missed. Fired again. This time she heard a cry of pain. The men began returning fire. Bullets thudded into the cabin walls. Glass shattered. But Elena kept low, kept moving, changing positions after each shot the way Caleb had taught her. She was alone, outnumbered. But she wasn't helpless, and she would not let them take her children. The siege had begun. The gunfire shattered the Montana night like breaking glass. Elena crouched behind the overturned table, Winchester hot in her hands, counting shots in her head the way Caleb had taught her. She'd fired 7 times. The rifle held 15 rounds. 8 left before she'd need to reload. Outside, Merrick's men had taken cover behind the barn and woodpile. They fired sporadically, testing her defenses, trying to figure out how many people were inside. Elena let them wonder. She moved after each shot, never staying in one position long enough to become a target. One man lay in the snow 20 feet from the cabin, clutching his leg, where Elena's second shot had found him. He was screaming high and panicked. The sound cut through the night like a saw blade. "Shut him up!" one of the others hissed. The wounded man kept screaming. His companions ignored him, more concerned with the woman who'd just demonstrated she knew how to shoot. Elena's mind raced through calculations. 4 men total. 1 wounded badly, effectively out of the fight. 3 still combat capable. She had ammunition for maybe 30 more shots if she was careful. The Colt held 6 rounds as backup. Enough to hold them off until dawn, maybe. But then what Caleb wouldn't be back for another 3 days at minimum. The cavalry he'd promised was even further away. She was alone. Not alone, she corrected herself. Samuel and Lily huddled in the root cellar depending on her. That made her stronger than any rifle. A voice called out from behind the barn. "Mrs. Ashford, my name is Garrett. We don't want to hurt you. Mr. Merrick just wants to talk. Come out peaceable and nobody else gets shot." Elena didn't waste breath answering. She'd seen what Merrick did to James. Talk meant torture and death. She fired toward the voice. Wood splintered on the barn wall. The man cursed and ducked lower. "Have it your way, lady." They tried rushing the cabin. Then 2 men coming from different angles. Elena fired at the closer one, forcing him back. She swung the rifle toward the second man, pulled the trigger. Click. Misfire. The cartridge was bad. The man realized his luck and kept coming. Elena worked the lever, ejecting the bad round, chambering a fresh one. The man was 10 feet from the door when she fired. He went down hard, not moving. That left 2 effective fighters. Better odds, but still not good. For an hour they traded shots. Elena moved constantly through the cabin, firing from different windows, different angles. She made them think there were multiple defenders. She made every shot count, even if she didn't always hit. The goal was to make them cautious, make them think twice. But her ammunition was dwindling. 20 rounds left, then 15, then 10. Around 2 in the morning, everything went quiet. No more shots, no more movement. Elena watched the shadows, trying to understand what they were planning. Then she smelled it. Smoke. Her blood turned to ice. They were burning her out. She ran to the back window and saw flames licking up the side of the barn. They'd set it on fire, and the wind was pushing smoke and sparks toward the cabin. The wooden structure would catch within minutes. Elena's mind worked frantically. She couldn't stay here, but going outside meant exposing herself and the children to gunfire. If they got to the root cellar exit on the far side of the cabin, they might make it to the tree line. Might. She grabbed blankets and soaked them in the water bucket, threw one over her shoulders. Then she rolled back the rug and yanked open the trap door. "Samuel, Lily, we have to move now." 2 small faces looked up at her, pale with fear. Samuel climbed out first, pulling Lily behind him. Elena wrapped the wet blanket around both children. "Listen carefully," she said, gripping Samuel's shoulders. "We're going to run to the trees. Stay low. Stay quiet. I'll be right behind you. If anything happens to me, you keep running. Follow the stream north until you find people. Tell them to get word to Caleb Stone at Fort Benton. Can you do that?" Samuel's jaw set firm. Yes, ma'am. Good boy. Elena kissed both their foreheads. On three. 1, 2, 3. She yanked open the back door and pushed the children through. They ran small legs pumping through snow. Elena came last, Winchester in one hand, Colt in the other, eyes scanning for threats. Gunfire erupted. Bullets kicked up snow around them. Elena turned and fired the Colt twice toward muzzle flashes. She heard a grunt of pain. Good. They made it to the tree line. Samuel pulled Lily behind a thick pine trunk. Elena joined them, breathing hard. Behind them the cabin's roof caught fire. Flames climbed into the night sky, bright orange against black. Everything Caleb owned, everything that had been sanctuary. Burning. Keep moving, Elena whispered. Quiet now. They moved through the forest, Elena constantly checking behind them. The men would follow. They had to. Merrick wanted her alive, and he'd paid good money for that. But the forest was Elena's ally now. It was dark, confusing, easy to lose a trail. She led the children along the stream just as she told Samuel, their tracks covered by running water and snow that had started falling again. They'd gone perhaps half a mile when Samuel grabbed her arm. "Mama, listen." Elena froze. Voices behind them, maybe 300 yards back. The men were tracking them. She pulled the children off the stream path and into a dense thicket. They huddled together, barely breathing. Snow fell on their shoulders, slowly covering them like a white shroud. 2 men passed within 20 feet carrying lanterns. They moved slowly, studying the ground. "Trail goes cold here," one muttered. "Water's covering tracks. Merrick's going to be pissed. Merrick can go to hell. That woman already shot Davy and Carson. I didn't sign on for this. You signed on when you took his money." They moved past lantern light, fading into darkness. Elena waited 10 more minutes before moving. When she was sure they were alone, she led the children deeper into the forest. They walked until dawn, putting as much distance as possible between themselves and Merrick's men. Samuel stumbled, off in exhaustion, pulling at him. Lily stopped crying after the first hour, which worried Elena more than tears would have. As gray light filtered through the trees, Elena found a hollow beneath a fallen log. It wasn't much, but it offered some shelter from wind and concealment from searchers. "We rest here," she said. 2 hours. Then we keep moving." She pulled the children close, sharing body heat. They fell asleep almost immediately. Elena stayed awake, Colt in hand, listening to every sound the forest made. Her mind drifted to Caleb. Had he made it to Fort Benton? Was he on his way back, or had something happened to him in the mountains? No. She refused to believe that. Caleb Stone was the kind of man who kept promises. He would return. She just had to keep herself and the children alive until he did. Meanwhile, 60 miles north, Caleb rode Thunder through the darkness at a pace that worried even him. The Appaloosa was tough bred for endurance, but everyone had limits. Still, he pushed. Something deep in his gut told him to hurry. That feeling had kept him alive through 4 years of war. He trusted it now. He'd left Fort Benton at sunset and ridden straight through the night. By dawn, he'd covered 40 miles. Thunder's flanks were dark with sweat despite the cold. They needed rest. Caleb found a sheltered spot and unsaddled Thunder, rubbing the horse down with handfuls of dry grass. He gave the Appaloosa grain from his saddlebag and melted snow for water. While Thunder ate and rested, Caleb forced himself to sleep for 2 hours. When he woke, the sun was well up. He saddled Thunder again, knowing he was asking a lot but having no choice. "One more push, boy," he murmured. "Then we're home." Thunder snorted and tossed his head. Ready. They rode. Back at Stone Ranch, or what remained of it, Thomas Merrick stood in the ruins of the cabin. The fire had burned most of the night before snow finally smothered it. Charred timbers jutted up like broken bones. Everything inside was ash, but no bodies, which meant Elena had escaped. Merrick's face was calm, but his eyes held cold fury. His men stood at a distance, not wanting to be too close when his temper broke. "4 of you," Merrick said softly. 4 grown men against 1 woman and 2 children, and she escaped. Not only escaped, but killed 2 of your friends and wounded a 3rd. Garrett, the leader of Merrick's hired guns, shifted uncomfortably. She could shoot, Mr. Merrick. Real good. Military training, I'd guess. I don't care if she was trained by Ulysses S. Grant himself. Merrick turned, and his voice dropped to something dangerous. I want her found. Today. The children don't matter anymore. Kill them if they slow you down. But I want Elena Ashford alive. The ledger is out there somewhere, probably on her. Find it. Find her. Or don't come back at all. Garrett nodded. Yes, sir. We'll pick up the trail. See that you do. Merrick walked back to his horse. He had another problem now. Stone would return eventually, and when he found his ranch burned and Elena missing, there would be hell to pay. Merrick needed to be far away when that happened, with Elena and the ledger in hand. He mounted and rode toward Silver Creek. Time to collect what he could and disappear. Mexico, maybe. Or California. Somewhere the law couldn't reach, and where money bought silence. In the forest, Elena woke to Samuel shaking her shoulder. Mama, Lily's really cold. Elena's heart clenched. She touched Lily's forehead. The girl's skin was icy, her lips faintly blue. The wet blanket had helped them escape the fire, but now was working against them. Hypothermia was setting in. We need to get her warm, Elena said. We need fire. But they'll see the smoke. Elena looked at her daughter's pale face. I know, but if we don't warm her up, she'll die anyway. She found a spot sheltered by overhanging rock and gathered dry wood from beneath snow. Starting a fire was difficult with numb fingers and damp materials, but her nursing training had included field medicine. She coaxed flame from a handful of dry pine needles and slowly built it into something sustainable. The warmth was immediate and glorious. Elena stripped Lily's wet outer clothes and wrapped her in the driest parts of the blanket, holding her close to the fire. Samuel huddled on the other side, extending his hands toward the flames. Better? Elena asked Lily. The girl nodded, still too cold to speak, but color was returning to her cheeks. That was something. They ate the last of the hardtack Elena had grabbed before fleeing the cabin. Not much, but it was food. She melted snow in her canteen for water. They'd need to find more food soon. The forest could provide if you knew where to look, but Elena's knowledge was limited. An hour later, the sound of horses reached them, multiple riders moving fast. Elena's blood went cold. She kicked snow over the fire, grabbed the children, and pulled them into the densest part of the thicket. Through the trees she saw them, 6 riders wearing U.S. Army blue, cavalry. Elena's first instinct was relief, then caution. Merrick had money. Could he have bought soldiers? Was this a trick? The lead rider held up his hand, stopping the column. He was young, maybe 25, with lieutenant's bars on his shoulders. He scanned the forest with sharp eyes. Spread out, he ordered. Look for tracks. Stone said there'd be a woman and 2 children. Stone. They knew Caleb's name. The lieutenant continued. Mrs. Ashford is under federal protection. Anyone who harms her answers to me personally. Clear? Yes, sir. The men responded. Elena made her decision. She stood up slowly, keeping the Colt at her side, but not aimed. I'm Elena Ashford. 6 rifles swung toward her. 6 sets of eyes locked on. Then the lieutenant raised his hand again. Stand down. Ma'am, I'm Lieutenant James Carter, United States Army. Colonel Marcus Brennan sent us. Caleb Stone asked us to protect you. Elena felt her knees go weak. Caleb made it to Fort Benton 2 days ago, showed us evidence against Thomas Merrick. We have orders to escort you to Fort Shaw and keep you safe until warrants are issued. Carter dismounted. Are you hurt? The children? We're alive. My daughter needs warmth. My son is exhausted. Your timing is good, Lieutenant. Carter smiled. Stone said you'd be tough. He wasn't wrong. He turned to his men. Corporal, get a blanket. Sergeant, build up that fire. We're making camp here. Within minutes, the soldiers had a proper fire going and were melting snow for hot water. One man produced hardtack and jerky. Another had coffee. Actual coffee. Lily drank the hot water with honey one of the soldiers provided. Samuel wolfed down hardtack like it was a feast. Elena just sat letting herself feel safe for the first time in 3 days. "Where's Caleb?" she asked Carter. "Riding hard for your ranch. He left Fort Benton last night, wouldn't wait for us. Said he had to get back to you." "He doesn't know the ranch burned." Carter's expression grew serious. "It burned when?" "Last night. Merrick's men attacked. I got the children out, but everything else—" Elena's voice caught. "Everything Caleb built. Gone." "Buildings can be rebuilt, ma'am. People can't." Carter pulled out a map. "We're going to take you to Fort Shaw. It's 60 miles north. 2 days of steady riding. You'll be safe there while Colonel Brennan processes the warrants." "What about Caleb? He'll go to the ranch and find us gone." "One of my men will ride to intercept him. We'll leave sign he can follow. Stone's a tracker. He'll find us." Elena nodded, relief and exhaustion washing over her in equal measure. They were safe. The cavalry had arrived just like Caleb promised. Now she just needed to see him again, to tell him his sacrifice hadn't been for nothing. "Lieutenant," she said, "there are still 3 or 4 of Merrick's men in these woods. They were tracking us." Carter's expression hardened. "Then they're about to have a very bad day. Corporal, take 2 men and scout the area. Anyone carrying weapons and not wearing a uniform gets arrested. If they resist, you're authorized to use necessary force." "Yes, sir." 3 soldiers melted into the forest. Carter turned back to Elena. "Rest now, ma'am. You're under the protection of the United States Army. Nobody's touching you or those children." For the first time in 6 months, Elena let herself believe it might be true. 30 miles south, Caleb stopped Thunder on a rise overlooking his ranch, or what had been his ranch. Even from this distance he could see the blackened ruins of the cabin, the barn partially collapsed, smoke still rising in thin wisps. His hands tightened on the reins until his knuckles went white. The ranch he'd built with his own hands, the home he'd offered to Elena and the children, destroyed. But the buildings didn't matter, only the people. Were they alive? Caleb urged Thunder into a gallop, racing down the slope toward the ruins. As he got closer, he saw the signs of battle. Bullet holes in the barn, blood in the snow, brass casings scattered around the yard. Someone had made a stand here. Someone had fought. He found the first body near the woodpile. One of Merrick's men shot through the chest. The second body was closer to the cabin, another bullet wound. No sign of Elena or the children. No small bodies in the ruins. Caleb searched the forest edge and found tracks. Small feet, woman's boots. Running, being chased. The tracks led north along the stream, then disappeared into deeper woods. His chest tightened. They'd escaped the fire, but were out there somewhere hunted. Unless... A whistle cut through the air. Caleb's hand went to his Colt, but then he recognized the pattern. Military signal. A soldier emerged from the trees, hands raised. "Mr. Stone, I'm Corporal Davies, Fort Shaw. Lieutenant Carter sent me to find you." Caleb's heart pounded. "Elena Ashford. The children. Where are they?" "Safe, sir. 10 miles north with the lieutenant and the rest of the detail. We found them this morning. They're fine. Shaken up but alive." The tension drained from Caleb's body so fast he nearly collapsed. "They're alive." "Yes, sir. Mrs. Ashford fought off 4 attackers, killed 2, wounded 1. She got the children out before the cabin burned. Toughest woman I've ever seen." Caleb closed his eyes briefly. Thank God. Thank whatever powers watched over fools and families. "Take me to them," he said. "Yes, sir. Follow me." They rode north, Corporal Davies setting a steady pace. As they went, the soldier filled Caleb in on what had happened. The attack, Elena's defense, the escape through the forest, the cavalry's arrival. She never stopped fighting Mr. Stone, never stopped protecting those kids. Lieutenant says she's got more courage than half the soldiers he's commanded. Caleb felt pride swell in his chest. He'd known Elena was strong, but this was something else entirely. They reached the cavalry camp as afternoon sun angled low. Caleb saw the fire first, then the soldiers standing guard. Then he saw her. Elena sat on a log, Lily asleep in her lap, Samuel beside her. She looked exhausted, her face smudged with soot and dirt, but alive, wonderfully, impossibly alive. She looked up as Caleb rode in. For a moment they just stared at each other. Then Elena was on her feet, carefully settling Lily with Samuel and running toward him. Caleb dismounted before Thunder fully stopped. Elena crashed into him, and he wrapped his arms around her, holding her like he'd never let go. She was shaking, whether from cold or relief he couldn't tell. "You came back," she whispered against his chest. "I promised." "The ranch." "I don't care about the ranch. I care about you." Elena pulled back to look at him, tears streaming down her face. "Caleb, I'm sorry. I tried to save it. I tried." "You saved what mattered. You saved yourself and the children. Buildings can be rebuilt." Samuel ran over and wrapped his arms around Caleb's waist. "You came back. I knew you would." Caleb ruffled the boy's hair. "I keep my promises." Lily woke and toddled over, still wrapped in a military blanket. Caleb scooped her up with one arm, keeping the other around Elena. The four of them stood there in the fading light, a family forged in fire and snow and promises kept. Lieutenant Carter approached. "Mr. Stone, Colonel Brennan sends his regards. We're escorting Mrs. Ashford and the children to Fort Shaw. You're welcome to join us." "I will. But first," Caleb looked at Elena, "there's something I need to say." He knelt in front of Samuel and Lily, still holding Elena's hand. "I asked you to be my family. You said yes. But that was before men burned my home, before they hunted you through the forest. If you want to go somewhere else, somewhere safer, I'll understand." Samuel shook his head firmly. "No, sir. We want to stay with you. Even though I couldn't protect you." "You did protect us," Elena said softly. "You gave me a rifle and taught me how to use it. You showed me the cellar. You planned for this. We survived because of you." Caleb stood, pulling them all close again. "Then we rebuild, together, and this time we build it stronger." In the distance, smoke still rose from Stone Ranch, but Caleb didn't look back. He looked at the family in his arms, at the soldiers who'd come to help, at the future stretching ahead despite everything. The ranch would rise again, and this time it would be built not just on land and timber, but on something that fire couldn't destroy. Love, family, promises kept. The ride to Fort Shaw took 2 days through country that seemed determined to freeze everything it touched. Lieutenant Carter's cavalry moved in tight formation with Elena, the children, and Caleb protected in the center. Soldiers rode point and rear guard rifles ready, eyes scanning every ridge and tree line for threats that never came. Merrick's remaining men had vanished like smoke. Smart choice. 6 trained cavalrymen were different odds than one woman alone in a burning cabin. They reached Fort Shaw on the 3rd day after the attack. The military post sat on a plateau overlooking the Sun River, its log stockade walls solid and reassuring. The American flag snapped in the wind above the parade ground. Soldiers drilled in the cold, their breath coming in white clouds, as sergeants barked orders. Carter led them to the commandant's quarters. Captain William Morrison, no relation to the corrupt sheriff in Silver Creek, greeted them with firm handshakes and sharp eyes that assessed everything. "Mr. Stone, Mrs. Ashford, children, welcome to Fort Shaw. Colonel Brennan's telegraph was quite detailed. You've had quite an ordeal." "That's one way to put it," Caleb said. Morrison gestured to chairs around a stove that radiated blessed heat. "You'll stay here as long as necessary. We have family quarters available, not fancy but warm and secure. No one gets into this fort without going through my men." Elena sank into a chair, Lily climbing into her lap immediately. The girl hadn't let her mother more than arm's length away since the fire. Samuel stood close to Caleb, one hand resting on the man's arm as if to verify he was real. "How long until Brennan's warrants come through?" Caleb asked. "Could be 2 weeks, maybe 3. Federal warrants require coordination between territories." Morrison poured coffee from a pot on the stove. But I've already sent men to Silver Creek to keep eyes on Merrick. If he tries to run, we'll know." "He'll run?" Elena said quietly. "Men like him always do when they're cornered." Morrison nodded. "Which is why I've also sent word to Fort Ellis and Fort Benton. Every military post between here and the Canadian border is watching for him. He won't get far." Over the next week, Fort Shaw became a strange kind of home. The family quarters Morrison provided were small but comfortable. 2 rooms with a wood stove, real beds, and windows that overlooked the parade ground. Samuel was fascinated by the soldiers drilling the cavalry horses, the organized rhythm of military life. Caleb spent his days helping where he could, mostly in the stables. Horses were horses, whether civilian or military, and good hands were always welcome. It kept him busy while lawyers and marshals processed paperwork in distant offices. Elena worked in the fort's infirmary. Her nursing skills were immediately valuable. The post surgeon, an older man named Dr. Matthews, was grateful for help with everything from setting broken bones to treating frostbite. It gave Elena purpose and kept her mind off waiting. The children attended the fort's small school with soldiers' children. Samuel proved quick with numbers and reading. Lily slowly came out of her shell, though she still woke screaming some nights from dreams of fire and men with guns. On those nights, Caleb would sit with her until she fell back asleep, humming old songs his mother had sung to him. Songs about home and safety and tomorrow's sunshine. Elena would watch from the doorway, her heart full of something she was afraid to name but couldn't deny. 10 days after their arrival, Lieutenant Carter returned from a patrol with news. He found Caleb in the stables brushing down thunder. "Mr. Stone thought you'd want to know. We found the remains of Merrick's hired men, all 3 of them." Caleb looked up sharply. "Dead? Froze to death about 15 miles from your ranch. Looks like they got lost in the storm that came through 2 days after the attack. Their horses bolted. They tried to make it on foot, didn't succeed." Caleb absorbed this. Nature finished what Elena started. "Seems that way. Found this on one of them." Carter handed over a leather wallet. Inside were bills totaling $300 and a note in neat handwriting. "Payment on delivery of Elena Ashford, Thomas Merrick." Evidence. More pieces falling into place. "There's more," Carter continued. "Sheriff Morrison in Silver Creek has been arrested. Federal marshals came through yesterday. Turns out he was on Merrick's payroll for years. He's talking now, trying to save his own neck, giving up names, locations, everything." "What about Merrick himself?" "Ran. Left Silver Creek the night of the fire. But here's the interesting part. He didn't head for Mexico like everyone expected. He went north." Caleb frowned. "North?" "That's toward Canadian territory. Toward Fort Benton." "Exactly. Colonel Brennan thinks Merrick's trying to reach the border, cross into Canada where U.S. warrants can't touch him." "How far did he get?" "Last confirmed sighting was Great Falls 3 days ago. Brennan has men tracking him, but Merrick's moving fast and he knows the country." Carter paused. "Brennan sent another telegram, asked if you wanted to be there when they bring him in." Caleb's jaw tightened. Part of him wanted nothing more than to ride out and help hunt Merrick down. But he looked through the stable door toward the quarters where Elena and the children waited. "No," he said finally. "My place is here. With them. Brennan will handle it." Carter nodded with what looked like approval. "That's what I told the captain you'd say. Some things matter more than revenge." That afternoon, Caleb walked with Elena along the fort's perimeter. The children were in school and they had a rare moment alone. Snow fell gently, the kind that made everything look clean and new. "Carter told me about Merrick running," Elena said. "Do you think they'll catch him?" "Marcus Brennan is the best tracker I know. He'll catch him." Elena was quiet for a moment. Then she said, "I keep thinking about James, about how he tried to do the right thing and it got him killed. How close Samuel and Lily came to the same fate." Caleb took her hand. "But they didn't. You fought. You survived. You saved them. We survived because of you. Because you stopped that day at the train station. Because you taught me to shoot. Because you rode to Fort Benton. We survived because we helped each other. That's what families do. Elena stopped walking. "Is that what we are? A family?" Caleb turned to face her fully. The question hung between them heavy with meaning. They'd known each other less than 3 weeks, but those weeks had held more life than some people experienced in years. "I'd like us to be," Caleb said carefully. "If you want that. I know it's fast. I know we're still figuring things out. But Elena, when I thought you might be dead in that fire, something broke in me. The thought of a world without you in it. I can't do that. Won't do that." Elena's eyes glistened. "I was so scared. Not of dying, but of the children being alone again. Of them losing another father figure right after they'd found you. They won't lose me. And neither will you. Not if I have anything to say about it." Elena stepped closer. "Caleb Stone, are you asking me to marry you? I'm asking if you'd consider it, someday, when all this is settled, when we can stand in a church without worrying about who might be coming through the door with a gun." "Yes," Elena said simply. "Yes, I'll consider it. More than consider it. Yes." Caleb pulled her close, and they stood there in the falling snow, holding each other against the cold and the memories and the uncertain future. Two broken people who'd found wholeness in the most unlikely place. 3 days later, a rider came hard into Fort Shaw. His horse was lathered despite the cold, and he carried dispatches marked urgent. Captain Morrison read them and immediately sent for Caleb and Elena. They gathered in his office, tension thick enough to cut with a knife. "Thomas Merrick has been apprehended. Colonel Brennan's men caught up with him at dawn 20 miles from the Canadian border. He was traveling with the last of his money sewn into his coat lining and a forged passport." When the marshals called for his surrender, Merrick drew his weapon. The shootout lasted less than a minute. Merrick took a bullet to the shoulder. 2 of his remaining associates were killed. He's now in federal custody, bound for Denver in chains. Elena swayed, and Caleb's hand shot out to steady her. "It's over," he said softly. "It's really over." "There's more," Morrison continued. "The evidence you provided Mrs. Ashford. The evidence you provided Mrs. Ashford combined with Sheriff Morrison's testimony, and the ledger is more than enough to convict him on multiple counts of kidnapping, human trafficking, and murder." Elena swayed, and Caleb's hand shot out to steady her. "It's over," he said softly. "It's really over." "There's more," Morrison continued. "Of the 47 victims documented in Merrick's ledger, 23 have been located and freed." Morrison continued. "There's one more thing. Among the rescued victims was a woman named Catherine Hayes. She was taken from a Colorado town in 1885. He paused, watching Caleb carefully. "She says her maiden name was Catherine Stone, from Virginia. She had a brother named Caleb who fought in the war. She thought you were dead." Caleb's cup clattered to the floor. "Catherine," his voice broke. "My sister Catherine. She's at Fort Ellis now, recovering. She asked if Caleb Stone of Montana was the same Caleb Stone who saved Marcus Brennan at Wilderness. When I confirmed it, she wept. They were being held in various locations throughout Colorado and New Mexico. Families are being reunited as we speak." Elena pressed her hand to her mouth. 23 people. Because James kept records. Because he tried to do the right thing. Your husband was a brave man, Mrs. Ashford. His death wasn't in vain." They walked back to their quarters in silence, processing the news. Inside, Samuel and Lily were playing a game with carved wooden soldiers one of the cavalrymen had made for them. They looked up as their mother and Caleb entered. "What's wrong?" Samuel asked, always too perceptive. Elena knelt beside her children. "Nothing's wrong, sweetheart. Something's very right. The man who hurt your father has been caught. He can't hurt anyone else ever again." Samuel's expression was hard to read. Relief, maybe, or grief finally allowed to surface. "Good," he said quietly. "That's good." Lily just hugged her mother, not fully understanding, but sensing the change in atmosphere. That night Caleb lay awake in the small bed they'd given him, staring at the ceiling. In the next room he could hear Elena singing softly to Lily, the same lullaby she'd sung every night since the fire. a song about stars and safety and tomorrow's dawn. He thought about his ranch now just charred timber and ash, thought about the life he'd built there over 15 years, all destroyed in one night, thought about what came next. Rebuilding would take months. Money would be tight. Winter was only halfway through and they couldn't start serious construction until spring. He'd need to find temporary shelter, probably in Silver Creek or one of the other towns, find work to earn money for supplies. But as he lay there listening to Elena's voice, Caleb realized something. The ranch wasn't just land and buildings. It never had been. It was the people who lived there, the family who called it home. And that family was intact. Damaged maybe, scarred certainly, but alive and together. That was enough. More than enough. It was everything. 2 weeks later they left Fort Shaw. Captain Morrison provided a wagon and supplies. Several soldiers finishing their enlistment offered to help with reconstruction come spring. Lieutenant Carter promised to visit once the weather broke. They didn't head directly to what remained of Stone Ranch. Instead, Caleb drove the wagon to Silver Creek. The town had changed in the weeks since Morrison's arrest. The corrupt sheriff was gone. A new man recommended by Colonel Brennan had taken the position. The townspeople who'd been too afraid to speak out against Merrick's influence now came forward with information, with apologies, with offers to help. Caleb rented rooms above the general store. Not much, but warm and dry. A place to spend the rest of winter while making plans for spring. The general store owner, Mr. Henderson, was the same man who'd warned Caleb about the reward on Elena's head. Now he apologized profusely. "I was scared," Henderson admitted. "Morrison had the whole town cowed, but that's no excuse. I should have helped." "You're helping now," Caleb said. "That's what matters." Henderson gave them credit for supplies. Other townspeople contributed. A carpenter offered his services for rebuilding. A widow donated furniture she no longer needed. Slowly, a community that had been fractured by corruption began to heal. Samuel started school in Silver Creek's one-room schoolhouse. The teacher, Miss Warren, recognized his quick mind and gave him extra work to challenge him. Lily attended as well, though she still clung to Elena whenever strangers came too close. Elena found work again as a nurse. Silver Creek's doctor was old and needed help. She proved invaluable, and the grateful patients paid what they could, sometimes in cash, sometimes in food or services. Caleb took work wherever he could find it, shoeing horses, repairing wagons, helping with winter cattle feeding on nearby ranches. The work was hard and the pay modest, but it was honest, and each coin went into a jar marked rebuilding. On Sundays, weather permitting, they drove the wagon out to Stone Ranch. Caleb would walk through the ruins planning, measuring, figuring what could be salvaged and what needed replacing. The stone fireplace had survived. The barn's frame was damaged but repairable. The well was intact. Samuel helped learning to measure and calculate. "How big will the new cabin be?" he asked. "Bigger than before," Caleb said. 4 rooms instead of 2, proper bedroom for you and Lily, proper bedroom for your mother and me." He paused, then added, "If she'll have me." Samuel grinned. "She will. I heard her telling Miss Warren she'd never met a man like you. Good things, I hope. The best things." By late February, something remarkable happened. Word of Caleb's situation had spread through military channels. Veterans he'd served with during the war began sending money. Not much from any individual, but it added up. A few dollars here, $5 there. Some sent lumber from their own property. One sent a letter saying he couldn't send money but could send his son to help with construction come spring. The letters were all similar in tone. "You saved my life at Shiloh. You pulled me from that river at Antietam. You carried me 15 miles when I was shot." Caleb had forgotten half these incidents. They'd been part of war, part of what you did for fellow soldiers. But the men hadn't forgotten, and now they repaid old debts. Elena read the letters with tears in her eyes. "You touched so many lives." "I was just doing what needed doing. That's what makes you who you are." In early March, Caleb took Elena to dinner at Silver Creek's small restaurant. The children stayed with Miss Warren, who'd become a trusted friend. It was the first time they'd been truly alone since Fort Shaw. Over stew and fresh bread they talked about the future, about plans for the ranch, about Samuel's education, about whether Lily would ever fully recover from the trauma. Then Caleb reached across the table and took Elena's hand. "I asked you once if you'd consider marrying me. You said yes. I'm asking now if you're still willing." Elena's smile was brilliant. "I'm willing, more than willing. We don't have much. The ranch is still ashes. I'm living above a general store doing odd jobs. This isn't the life I wanted to offer you." "Caleb, you offered me life itself. You offered my children a future. Everything else is just details." Caleb pulled a ring from his pocket, simple silver with a small stone that caught the lamplight. "It was my mother's. Only thing I have left from before." Elena's hand shook as he slid it onto her finger. "It's perfect. So we'll do this proper church wedding when the circuit preacher comes through. As proper as we can make it, with Samuel and Lily standing up with us, with our friends from town, with everyone who helped us survive." They were married 4 weeks later in Silver Creek's church. The building was packed. Soldiers from Fort Shaw made the trip. Townspeople filled every pew. Lieutenant Carter stood as Caleb's best man. Miss Warren stood with Elena. Samuel and Lily watched from the front row, faces glowing. A month after the wedding, Caleb rode to Fort Ellis. Catherine was thin, her eyes carrying shadows that would never fully fade, but she was alive. When she saw him, she wept. They sat for hours on the fort's porch, filling the gaps of 18 years, her capture, her survival, his family, his ranch. "I always knew you'd keep going," she said. "You were always the stubborn one." By spring, Catherine had settled near Ashford, teaching at Elena's school alongside her new sister-in-law. Another piece of the broken made whole. The circuit preacher, an old man named Reverend Thomas, spoke about faith and survival, about promises kept and families built from love rather than blood, about how the hardest winters produced the strongest roots. When it came time for vows, Caleb's voice was steady. "I promise to protect you and your children, to build a home where you feel safe, to never let you face darkness alone." Elena's voice shook, but her words were clear. "You have my word to stand beside you, to help rebuild what was lost, to make a family that honors the memories of those who came before. I now pronounce you husband and wife." The kiss was gentle, but it sealed something that had been building since that first day in the snow. Not just a marriage, but a promise. Not just two people, but a family. Outside, snow was melting. Spring was coming, and with it, the chance to rebuild. That evening in their rooms above the general store, the newly married couple sat with Samuel and Lily. Caleb had something to say, something he'd been thinking about for weeks. "I want to adopt you both," he told the children. "Legally. Make you Stone by name as well as by choice, but only if you want that. I won't replace your father. James Ashford was a brave man who loved you, but I'd be honored to be your father going forward." Samuel didn't hesitate. "I want that. I want to be Samuel Stone." Lily looked at her mother, then at Caleb. "Will you still be Uncle Caleb?" "I'll be whatever you need me to be." "Then I want to be Lily Stone too." Elena wiped tears from her eyes. "James would approve. He'd want you to have a father, a good father." The legal paperwork would take time, but the important part was already done. They were a family now, official in all the ways that mattered. As winter gave way to spring, plans for rebuilding became action. The first warm days in April saw a wagon train arrive at Stone Ranch. 15 men, some veterans Caleb had served with, some townspeople, some soldiers on leave. They came with tools and lumber and determination. In 2 weeks they raised the frame of a new cabin, larger than before, stronger built with help from people who cared. The stone fireplace was cleaned and repaired. The barn was rebuilt. New corrals went up. Elena worked alongside the men, as did Samuel. Even Lily helped carrying water and tools. Miss Warren came out with other town women bringing food and setting up a field kitchen. It felt like a barn raising from the old days, community coming together, people helping people. By mid-May, the cabin was habitable, not finished but livable. They moved in on a warm evening carrying their few possessions from town. Samuel ran through the larger space, delighted with a room of his own. Lily found the corner where her bed would go and declared it perfect. That night the four of them stood on the newly built porch, looking out over land that had nearly destroyed them but was now home again. Stars blazed overhead, brilliant in the clear mountain air. "We did it," Elena said softly. "We actually did it." Caleb pulled his family close. Wife, son, daughter. Words that still felt new but absolutely right. "We survived. We rebuilt. And we're stronger than before." "What happens now?" Samuel asked. "Now," Caleb smiled. "Now we live. We work this land. We raise cattle and horses. We grow old together. We make this place mean something." "It already means something," Elena said. "It means home." And she was right. Stone Ranch wasn't just buildings and acres anymore. It was the place where four people who'd been broken found themselves whole, where promises made in snow had been kept through fire and fear. It was home. Finally, completely, undeniably home. 5 years passed like water flowing over stones, steady and inevitable. Stone Ranch grew from ashes into something more substantial than it had ever been before. The cabin stood larger and stronger, its walls lined with memories. The barn housed a dozen horses, now including Thunder's offspring. Cattle grazed in pastures Caleb and Samuel had fenced together post by post. Samuel, now 13, had grown tall and capable. He could shoe a horse, mend a fence, and read the weather with accuracy that sometimes surprised even Caleb. The boy had James Ashford's quick mind and his mother's determination combined with something entirely his own, a quiet strength that promised the kind of man he'd become. Lily at 10 remained the gentler spirit. She helped her mother in the garden, tended the chickens with care, and had developed an unexpected talent for drawing. The walls of the cabin displayed her sketches of horses, mountains, and family portraits that captured more than mere likeness. They captured feeling. Elena had blossomed in ways that still took Caleb's breath away. The haunted look had faded from her eyes, replaced by something peaceful. She'd become essential to Silver Creek's community, delivering babies, treating injuries, offering comfort to the dying. People trusted her, respected her. The town's new doctor, young Dr. Patterson, called her his most valuable assistant. And Caleb himself had found something he thought lost forever after his first family died: purpose beyond mere survival. He woke each morning to Elena's face on the pillow beside him. He worked land that was truly his, alongside children who called him father without hesitation. He slept each night in a home built not just with lumber and nails, but with love. It was April of 1892 when the letter arrived from Denver. Caleb recognized Colonel Marcus Brennan's handwriting immediately. He opened it at the dinner table, Elena and the children watching. "Thomas Merrick was executed this morning," Caleb read aloud. "Hanged for murder, kidnapping, and human trafficking. His last words were a confession clearing James Ashford's name completely. Official documents are being filed to that effect. Your wife's late husband is now recognized as a hero who gave his life fighting corruption." Elena's hand went to her mouth. 5 years of waiting for this final chapter to close. Samuel reached for his mother's other hand. "It's finished, then," Elena said quietly. "Really finished." "It's finished," Caleb agreed. "James can rest now, and so can we." They buried the letter in a small ceremony near James's marker, which Caleb had carved and placed in the family plot on a hill overlooking the ranch. The stone read, "James Ashford, loving father, brave man, 1851 to 1886. "Thank you," Elena whispered to the grave, "for being brave, for keeping records, for giving us a chance at justice." She paused. "And thank you for your children. I promise we're raising them right." That evening, after Samuel and Lily had gone to bed, Caleb and Elena sat on the porch as they did most nights. The stars blazed overhead, and a warm breeze carried the scent of new grass and possibility. "I've been thinking," Elena said, "about the future, about legacy." "What kind of legacy?" "The kind that matters. Samuel will take over the ranch someday. He's learning everything he needs. But Lily—" Elena smiled. "She has gifts that shouldn't be wasted on ranch work alone. She could study, become a teacher maybe, or an artist. Education costs money. We have money now. The ranch does well, and I've been saving from my nursing work." Elena turned to look at him. "I want our children to have choices, to see more of the world than just Montana." Caleb considered this. His own education had ended at 14. The war had stolen his chance for more. But times were changing. Montana would become a state soon. Towns were growing. Opportunities existed that hadn't been there in his youth. "Then we'll send them to school," he said. "Both of them. Let them learn. Let them choose their own paths. Even if that means leaving the ranch. Even then, we build this place so they have roots, but we don't chain them here." Elena kissed him gently. "You're a good man, Caleb Stone." "I'm a lucky man. That's different." The next morning brought unexpected visitors. 3 riders crested the ridge, moving at a steady pace. Caleb recognized Lieutenant Carter immediately, now wearing captain's insignia. The other 2 were strangers. Carter dismounted with a broad smile. "Mr. Stone, Mrs. Stone, good to see you both." They shook hands warmly. "Captain, now I see," Caleb noted. "Congratulations." "Thank you. It's been a good 5 years." Carter gestured to his companions. "These gentlemen are from the territorial government. They'd like to speak with you about something." The older of the 2 men stepped forward, gray-haired, well-dressed, with the bearing of someone accustomed to authority. "Mr. Stone, Mrs. Stone, I'm William Chadwick, representing the Montana Territorial Legislature. May we speak inside?" Curious and slightly wary, Caleb led them into the cabin. Elena put coffee on while the men settled around the table. Samuel and Lily watched from the doorway until Elena sent them outside to do chores. Chadwick pulled papers from his satchel. "Mr. Stone, we've been reviewing land grants and homestead claims as part of Montana's preparation for statehood. Your case came to our attention." Caleb's hands curled into fists. "My claim is legal. Proved up in 1877, all requirements met." "We know. That's not why we're here." Chadwick spread the papers on the table. "We're here because of what happened in 1887. Your actions against Thomas Merrick's trafficking ring. The lives saved. The corruption exposed." Elena poured coffee with steady hands, though Caleb saw the tension in her shoulders. The second man, younger, with a lawyer's keen eyes, spoke up. "The territorial government wishes to recognize your service. Both of you. Mr. Stone for risking everything to bring evidence to Colonel Brennan. Mrs. Stone for defending your family and surviving against overwhelming odds." "We did what anyone would do," Elena said quietly. "But most people didn't," Chadwick replied. "Most people stayed silent. Sheriff Morrison took bribes for years. Townspeople looked away. You 2 refused to accept that evil could go unpunished." He pushed a document across the table. "The territory is granting you an additional 160 acres adjacent to your current property, free and clear in recognition of service to justice." Caleb stared at the paper, not quite believing what he was reading. 320 acres total. Enough to build something truly substantial. Enough to provide for children and grandchildren. "Why?" he asked simply. "Because Montana needs people like you," the lawyer said. "People who stand up, who fight for what's right. When we become a state, and we will soon, we want citizens who represent the best of what America can be." Carter added, "Also because Colonel Brennan recommended it personally. He's quite influential in Denver now. His word carries weight." Elena's fingers gripped Caleb's wrist under the table. He squeezed it gently. "We accept," Caleb said, "with gratitude. But I have a condition." Chadwick raised an eyebrow. Oh, the 47 people whose names were in Merrick's ledger, the ones who survived. If any of them want to come to Montana, want to start fresh, we'll help them. Give them work, teach them skills, help them find land. We can't do it alone, but with this additional acreage we can do more. The two government men exchanged glances. Then Chadwick smiled. That's exactly the kind of thinking we need. I'll see what can be arranged. After the visitors left, Caleb and Elena stood in their yard looking out over land that was now twice as large. Samuel and Lily came running from the barn, questions tumbling over each other. What did they want? Are we in trouble? Why was Captain Carter here? Caleb knelt down to their level. We've been given more land. The government recognizes what your mother and I did to stop Thomas Merrick. They're rewarding us. Does that mean we're rich? Lily asked with childish directness. It means we have opportunity, Elena said. It means we can build something even better. And it means we can help other people who've been hurt the way we were. Over the following months, word spread about Stone Ranch's offer. 3 families who'd been victims of Merrick's trafficking made their way to Montana. Caleb helped them settle on portions of the new land, providing tools, seed, and knowledge. By winter, 3 new homesteads stood on what had been empty grassland. The community grew. Samuel now had friends his own age nearby. Lily had playmates. Sunday gatherings became common, with families sharing food and stories. What had been a solitary ranch became the heart of a small but thriving settlement. Elena started a school in the ranch's expanded barn. 6 children attended at first, then 10. She taught reading, writing, arithmetic, and practical skills. Samuel assisted her, discovering he had a gift for teaching younger children. Lily drew illustrations for lessons, making learning visual and memorable. The settlement needed a name. After much discussion, they called it Ashford, in memory of James, the man whose courage had started it all. Elena cried when the sign went up at the main crossroad. Happy tears, but tears nonetheless. Years continued to flow. Samuel turned 16, then 18. He'd grown into a man any father would be proud of, tall and strong, with his mother's compassion and Caleb's steady nature. He talked of studying agriculture at the new university in Bozeman, of learning modern ranching techniques to bring back to Stone Ranch. Lily, at 15, showed artistic talent that couldn't be ignored. Her drawings had progressed to paintings capturing Montana's beauty in ways that made people stop and stare. A visiting art dealer from Helena offered to represent her work. Elena encouraged it. Caleb agreed, though part of him ached at the thought of his daughter leaving for the wider world. In the spring of 1900, Elena told Caleb she was pregnant. They'd assumed they were past the age for children, but nature had different plans. At 45, Elena carried new life with the same determination she'd carried everything else. Samuel and Lily were delighted at the prospect of a sibling, though both were nearly grown. They prepared the cabin's smallest bedroom as a nursery, painting it themselves. Samuel built a cradle from pine he'd cut and cured himself. Lily painted it with flowers and birds. The baby came in November during the first snow. Dr. Patterson attended with Elena's own midwife skills, guiding her through labor that was difficult but ultimately successful. A boy healthy and strong-lunged. They named him James Thomas Stone. James for Elena's first husband, whose sacrifice had made this life possible. Thomas for Caleb's brother, lost in the snow so many years ago. The baby would carry both legacies forward. Caleb held his son this unexpected gift and felt time fold in on itself. He was 50 years old, gray in his beard with lines earned from decades of sun and work. Yet here he held new life, a second chance at fatherhood. "He looks like you," Elena said from the bed, tired but radiant. "He looks like hope," Caleb replied. Samuel and Lily crowded around, marveling at their baby brother. Lily sketched the scene, capturing a moment that would hang on the cabin wall for generations, a family complete, bound not by blood alone, but by choices made in snow and fire. The settlement of Ashford continued to grow. By 1905, it had a proper school building, a church, a general store, and nearly 30 families. The railroad reached within 10 miles, bringing connection to the wider world. Montana had achieved statehood in 1889, and with it came new opportunities and challenges. Samuel, now 26, ran much of Stone Ranch's daily operations. He'd studied in Bozeman for 3 years and returned with knowledge that transformed the ranch into one of the region's most productive. He'd married a schoolteacher from Helena named Mary, and they'd built a home on the northern section of the property. Their first child was due in summer. Lily had gone to San Francisco to study art. Her paintings sold well, and she'd made a name for herself in Western art circles, but she came home every year unable to stay away from the land and family that had formed her. She was engaged to a photographer she'd met in California, a kind man named Robert, who understood her need for roots despite her artistic wings. Young James, now 5, showed signs of being a force of nature. He had Elena's determination, Caleb's stubbornness, and an independence all his own. He followed Samuel everywhere, learning to ride almost before he could walk properly. In the summer of 1910, on a day that felt stolen from paradise, 3 generations of Stones gathered for a photograph. Samuel with his wife Mary and their 2 children. Lily home for a visit with Robert. Elena and Caleb, now 65 and 60, still strong but showing the inevitable marks of time. And young James, 10 years old, grinning at the camera with gap-toothed joy. The photographer brought from Helena for the occasion positioned them on the cabin's porch. 4 generations, if you counted the presence of James Ashford in Samuel and Lily's faces in the name carried forward. "Everyone hold still," the photographer called. "This will take a moment." Caleb put his arm around Elena. She leaned into him, fitting perfectly after 23 years of marriage. Samuel stood tall with his family. Lily glowed with happiness. Young James fidgeted but managed to stay still long enough. The shutter clicked, capturing a moment. A family. A legacy. That evening, after the visitors had gone to their various homes, Caleb and Elena sat on the porch as they had 1,000 times before. Young James was asleep inside. The ranch lay peaceful under stars that seemed close enough to touch. "Do you ever think about that day?" Elena asked. "The train station, the storm." "Every day," Caleb admitted. "I think about how close I came to riding past, how one decision changed everything for all of us." Elena gestured to the settlement visible in the distance, lights glowing in windows. "All those families, all those lives, because you stopped, because we both refused to give up." Elena was quiet for a moment. Then she said, "I have something to tell you. Dr. Patterson confirmed it yesterday. My heart is failing, Caleb. I have perhaps a year, maybe less." The words hit like bullets, but Caleb didn't flinch. He'd been a soldier too long to show shock. Instead, he pulled her closer. "Then we make it a good year." "I'm not afraid," Elena said. "I've lived more in these 23 years than most people live in twice that time. I've raised children, saved lives, built a community, loved and been loved." She looked up at him. "No regrets." "None. Not a single one." They sat in silence, holding each other while stars wheeled overhead. Down in the settlement, someone was playing a fiddle. Children's laughter carried on the breeze, life continuing as it always did. Elena lived 18 more months, defying Dr. Patterson's predictions through sheer will. She saw Samuel's 3rd child born. She attended Lily's wedding, walking her daughter down the aisle with Caleb on one side and Robert on the other. She taught young James to read, to garden, to see beauty in simple things. She died on a spring morning in 1912, surrounded by family. Her last words were, "Thank you for stopping." Caleb held her hand as she passed and felt something break inside himself, but he didn't shatter. The family they'd built held him together. Samuel's steady presence, Lily's fierce love, young James's need for a father. They kept him whole through grief that might have destroyed a lesser man. They buried Elena on the hill overlooking Stone Ranch next to James Ashford's marker. Caleb carved her stone himself, working through the summer with hands that remembered this work from 40 years before. Elena Ashford Stone, 1855 to 1912. Beloved wife, mother healer. She chose to fight. The settlement mourned with him. Nearly 200 people came to the funeral lives she'd touched through medicine teaching or simple kindness. They told stories of how she'd delivered their children, nursed them through sickness, taught them to read, shown them compassion when the world had been cruel. Samuel spoke of her courage fleeing with 2 children through 6 months of hell, never giving up. Lily spoke of her gentleness, how she'd somehow remained soft despite experiencing such hardness. Young James, only 12, simply said, "She was the best mama anyone could have." Caleb couldn't speak at first, but as they stood at the grave, words came. Not practiced or polished, but true. "Elena taught me that courage isn't the absence of fear, it's acting despite it. She showed me that one person's choice to stand and fight can change everything. It's standing up when everything says to stay down." He looked out over the people gathered. "She saved me long before I saved her, gave me purpose, gave me home." He paused, then added, "And she'd want us to keep going, keep building, keep helping, keep being the family she believed we could be." Caleb lived another 9 years after Elena's death. He watched Samuel transform Stone Ranch into one of Montana's most successful operations. He saw Lily's art hang in galleries across the West. He guided young James through boyhood into young manhood, passing on everything he knew about land, horses, honor, and promises kept. In the winter of 1921, at 71 years old, Caleb grew ill. The doctor said it was his heart worn out from decades of hard use. Samuel brought him to town to the house Caleb and Elena had once lived above the general store. It seemed fitting, closing the circle. Young James, now 21 and preparing to attend university, sat with him often. "Tell me again," James would say, "about the day you met Mother." And Caleb would tell it. The storm, the desperate woman with 2 starving children, the decision to stop when he could have ridden on, the promise made in snow that had changed everything. "Your mother was the bravest person I ever knew," Caleb would say. "She fought when fighting seemed hopeless. She saved those children through pure will. Samuel and Lily wouldn't exist without her courage." "And we wouldn't exist without yours," James replied. "You chose